Joe Cobb talks about leaving us alone if we hand over Ringo, but I know his type. He and his friends will come after the town eventually.
The Fallout New Vegas tutorial is perfect. Here's why. The game starts us off with the intro cutscene, letting us know all the different factions and what they mean to the land that is Vegas. We are then put into our character and get to listen to Benny's monologue while the two geekers gawk at us the entire time. The important key here in this intro to the game is never seeing our character, but vaguely learning who we were. It never displays any attributes or traits of our character, so it lets the player decide what those things will be. It lets the player interpret what type of person we were before our death, perfect for role playing. We then wake up greeted to our favorite doctor of the wasteland, Doc Mitchell. And the first thing we do is give our character a name and create our character's appearance. The character creator could definitely use some work though, as it consists of a lot of menus with sliders. Overall though, you can still make a decent looking character of your choice. With character creation complete, we then learn how to walk over to the Vigor Tester to assign some special stats. Along the way, if the player is curious enough, they can look around and even begin to learn how to loot some items. Now with the tester, we assign some special stats. Nothing too out of the ordinary, but something I really appreciate is that the game gives you a description of what these specials will affect, like perception with explosives or agility with guns. This is something I really appreciate, as in other tutorials like Fallout 4, it doesn't say what it will affect and what perks will be in the category, so I always have to load into a different save to see the perk list and see what category unlocks certain perks. Small rant aside, the Vigor Tester is a cool, unique way of assigning special stats and feels immersive, yet like some fiction in a fun way. I've noticed that Fallout games are really good at creating a unique way to measure your abilities. For example, the Vault Tech salesman in Fallout 4 getting some paperwork from us, or in Fallout 3 reading a baby book we find on the ground. The Vigor Tester is no exception of these creative and immersive ways to create our character. With the bulk of our character created, Doc invites us to sit on his casting couch and answer some questions. These questions don't have any real effect and do get a little bit repetitive after a couple playthroughs, but it is fun to answer in crazy deranged ways, as there are some funny options, and Doc Mitchell actually acknowledges that and says this.
Sometimes when you give tests like this, you learn more than you was hoping for, and I reckon that ain't always the best thing.
The next couple questions don't really have anything going for them, except that one of the images looks like two bears high-fiving each other. These questions all lead up to the final part of character creation, tag skills and traits. Starting with tag skills, we get to put an extra 15 points into any of the skill categories, which is super useful and allows you to focus more into certain aspects of your build earlier in the game. Moving on to traits, these are well-balanced, unique features of our character. Each has a pro and a con that you'll have to consider when selecting, and most do have their own niche use. But the most important trait is definitely Wild Wasteland, which I could talk about for another 15 minutes, but in summary, creates random, wacky encounters that is a must pick in my opinion. We are finally done with character creation and are able to leave Doc's house. We head to the door and talk to Doc, where he returns some items we had on us. We get the starting 9mm pistol and a couple shots to go with it. He then informs us of who to talk to, which helps new players learn what to do next. But before we head out of his house, there are somewhat hidden skill checks to participate in. I don't know if these were intended to be part of the tutorial but never got finished, or are meant for players who just peek around a lot. Regardless, this exists and is a great example of skill checks and a great tutorial that teaches the player that their skills will matter in the game. At the chemistry station, you can create stim packs for drugs, and at the 9mm SMG, you can repair it and have a nice SMG early game. My character unfortunately didn't have the repair skill, so I got the stim packs and moved on. Lastly, there are some useful med boxes and ammunition boxes to loot, which will help teach the player what type of containers to look for when looting. 4 minutes into the video and a whole bunch of yapping later, we are finally leaving Doc's house. We leave the house and get greeted to a very cinematic sequence of clicking all the DLC notifications off my screen like I just got a virus on my computer. Anyways, we leave the house and the first person we see is Victor, who we know dug us up, so naturally we go and speak to our savior. Victor doesn't have much to say at all, but his presence is more important later in the game. Now, we head over to the saloon, as Doc said, and talk to the old fart outside and ask about the man who killed us. Old fart tells us some foreshadowing, telling us not to trust the man, which foreshadows to when you talk to Benny and agree to meet him at his penthouse, where he leaves you to die to his goons. Pete also tells us some important information about what's going on in Vegas with the NCR and the Legion and gives us some exposition into the conflict we will soon be a part of. Easy Pete also tells us about a location of the schoolhouse, which will serve as the first dungeon for the player, but more on that later. For now, we enter the saloon and talk to Sunny Smiles to do a majority of the tutorial. Like almost all players do, we shoot some bottles and I misclick on Victor. Do not shoot Victor. He is strong as hell and will blow you up with a grenade launcher. Anyway, I finish shooting the bottles and continue the tutorial with Sunny Smiles. With shooting practice complete, it's time to do some real shooting on some geckos. We learn to crouch and sneak up on some geckos at the water wells and try our best with the shitty varmint rifle. With the first batch of geckos dead, Sonic gives us the option to end the tutorial, which we obviously decline and continue on the gecko hunt. This hunt gets more exciting as we get to save a Goodspring settler who is being attacked by geckos. I don't do a very good job as I stand there shooting into the geckos with the varmint rifle for a while until they finally die. For our reward, we get some water and learn about faction reputation in the process, as we are now accepted by Goodsprings, which will provide us some discounts with Trudy. It is now time for the final part of Sunny's tutorial, which is the survival aspect. Admittedly, I never really use campfires in this game, but it can have its niche uses. We then make our way to the schoolhouse and run into a settler who displays how our reputation actually has an effect, as this random guy that we just met gives us a compliment.
We need more people like you around.
At the schoolhouse, I kill some mantises and pick up the Xander root. And since we're here, I decide to go into our first dungeon. I cleared out using a 9mm pistol and run into the first real skill check of the run. The game teaches the player skill magazines and how we can use them to temporarily boost our skill to hack the terminal. Since I lack the ability to pick the lock, I do just this and hack the terminal to open the safe. Overall, this small dungeon serves as a great tutorial on lockpicking or hacking and what useful items you can find inside buildings. Another thing to mention is how there are even more magazines spread around through the building, like Lad's Life, which helps with survival, and Salesman Weekly, which helps with barter. Moving on from the schoolhouse, I make my way to the cemetery to gather the last plant. When doing this part of the tutorial, they actually spawn in some bloatflies here to provide the player with more practice with the weapons. When chasing down one of these bloatflies, I accidentally leave the area of Goodsprings. And I was going to save this discussion for the end of the video, but since we're here, I'll talk about it now. Fallout New Vegas allows the player to do one final swap of their character's special stats, tag skills, and traits, as well as their name and appearance. Other games do this too, like Fallout 4, but it doesn't really mean anything. Let me explain. In Fallout 4, all you do is kill 8 rad roaches and leave the vault. In New Vegas, you hunt geckos, pick safes, hack terminals, kill powder gangers, convince people to join your cause. There's much more going on in terms of skill checks and weaponry that the player encounters, and the player may learn that all those points they put in strength is not helping them in these interactions. Which is why this system works so well in New Vegas, is because you do so much more and learn so much more about your build before you leave the starting area that more than likely you'll want to swap something out with something else. Now that I'm done with my tangent, we can move back into the cemetery and discover the snow globe. The game teaches us that these small trinkets actually have huge value and that some collectors out there are willing to pay us big time for them. Next, I pick the Brock flower and head back over to Sunny Smiles to use the campfire. We create healing powder at the campfire and are officially informed about how survival works in New Vegas, although most players will probably never use this feature. With this, Sunny Smiles tutorial is officially over and we head back up to the saloon to talk to Trudy. Here at the saloon, we learn of some of the conflict going down in Goodsprings as Joe Cobb makes a scene that he's looking for some dude named Ringo and will take over the town if he has to. I've talked to Trudy about the situation and she gives the player so much info about basically everything. Who the powder gangers are, the NCR, the Legion, and where my killer was heading off to. The entire clip is about a whole 5 minutes of just pure yapping. Trudy really is the goat of exposition. After all the yap, she informs me that her radio is broken, and this is technically the first skill check of the game if you missed the 2 back in Doc's house. It's a pretty easy one requiring 20 repairs, so if you have about 5 intelligence, you should be able to complete this. She pays me 50 caps initially, but with another skill check, you can squeak out another 50 caps using the barter of 20. If you've done everything in the order I have, you will also receive your first level up right here. It introduces adding skill points and decide to increase explosives, repair, and sneak to fully convince everybody later on. More importantly, from this first level up, we get introduced to the perk system of the game, and I just dump it into intense training and increase charisma. I should also mention that I think you could reselect this perk choice when you leave Goodsprings as well when you click rebuild character. Anyway, with this done, I head up to the gas station where Trudy told me I could find Ringo and speak to him to start the Ghost Town gunfight quest. Ringo and I plan to fight back against the Powder Puff Girls, and it's up to me to convince everybody to join our cause. But before leaving the gas station, we acquired a doctor's bag and another skill magazine for unarmed. As well, there's a safe you can lockpick if you have the skill, and a duffel bag you can loot that has lots of ammo, a sneak skill magazine, and other miscellaneous goods. It is now time to convince everybody to join the fight against the Powder Gangers, so I turn to Mr. Convincible and say, "It's convincing time," and then proceed to save the day by convincing all over everyone. Everyone then clapped, feeling inspired by the convincing they just witnessed. But for real though, I talked to Trudy and convinced her by utilizing the sneak magazine from the gas station, convinced Easy Pete for his dynamite, Chet Stingy Ass by using barter, and Doc Mitch by using medicine twice. Also, when talking to Chet, I bought some 9M ammo and a scope for it to learn how mods work for weapons. I think this kinda counts as part of the tutorial, as when talking to Chet he'll speak about weapon mods and special ammos, so it points you in the right direction. With everyone convinced, I report back to General Ringo when we're interrupted by Sunny Smiles letting us know that the Powder Gang is here. So I rush out with my dynamite and start chucking it, even crippling Ringo at some point. Maybe Easy Pete was right that we'd blow ourselves up. I also use my new scope 9mm to finish the job on Cobb and then loot him like a slob. With this new loot, I acquire some faction armor, and the game gives a nice overview in the Pip-Boy about how it works, so I won't go into detail myself. With the quest done and the fight over, I check to see if there's anything else I missed in this tutorial, so I speak to Sunny Smiles about some work. But she points me to the schoolhouse, which I've already completed. I inform her that I've been there and done that, and she allows me to keep the lockpick magazine and the bobby pin she gave me for the safe. So I then walk over to Victor's house, where I notice some cool attention to detail. The settler that complimented me way back, like 5 minutes ago, the settler was now wearing leather armor from Chet's shop, since I managed to convince him to provide the town with it. Pretty cool. This was my first time seeing this after probably 12 playthroughs. Moving on, I explore Victor's house, which holds a weapon repair kit. And with this, there's nothing really left in the tutorial area to explore or analyze. So, in conclusion, Fallout New Vegas' tutorial is, in my opinion, the best Fallout tutorial to date because of the impact of choices, skill checks, an entire Sunny Smiles tutorial, an entire quest, lockpicks, hacking, mini dungeon, and the ability to completely rebuild your character after you've done all those things. So, if you made it this far, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and if you did, drop a sub if you want to. If you didn't enjoy and you made it this far, you're a dedicated hater, and I respect that. Anyway, I'll see y'all in the next one.